Jesus 911.
As we always say on the show here, we're 10-8. We're in service, and so Luke, just to kind of update the audience, we I know you encountered Jess, or you first heard about Jess when he was doing the Taylor Marshall show, and you kind of you guys contacted each other after that interview, and you guys apparently thought you were of kindred spirits. So can you tell me a little bit about that phone call?
You know, Eddie, I served as 10 years as the police chief in Loveland, and during that time frame, the last 2 years, especially between 2013 and 2015 when I retired, the devil just took his veil off, and he was very visible. I watched him attack our community. I watched him attack our staff, and I had a very profound experience with St. Michael the Archangel during the Holy Hour, and really recognizes that we are in a battle, like St. Paul says, with principalities and powers not of this world. But, Eddie, I felt like I was an alien. I was working in an environment with a lot of, I know, baptized Catholics as police officers, but I honestly can't remember that there was one of them that was a practicing Catholic. And I went to lots of meetings and community meetings and council meetings, and there was a lot of talk about things going on in the community. And seeing the devil standing right there in front of me and having no one else recognize it, I just felt like I was an alien, and maybe I wasn't thinking right. Then I heard Jesse being interviewed actually by Al Cresta in the afternoon, and he was talking about The Devil and the City of Angels, a book that he had recently written and released, and the reality of Satan and his power and how he is present and on the prowl, and police officers that are not armored up and prepared for this battle, they're in danger. They're
absolutely,
souls are in peril.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I heard him, I thought, oh my gosh, there is a kindred spirit there. I need to reach out to him, and I did.
Good. Well, we're glad you did. And unfortunately, he's unable to get in, so he's out doing some apostolic work now. But we're gonna talk about some of these things that you encountered during your tenure on Loveland on the Loveland PD. And I'm gonna interject some things that happened to myself, Luke, because I think that it's important for us to realize that as time goes on and Catholics become more involved in their faith, the recognition of evil in law enforcement has to be brought out. And I'm not sure what ultimately is going to be the result of that, but I think that certainly we need to explore that a little bit. So let's do that today if we can. Al, so explain to us, initially, I know you probably had a very typical Catholic upbringing, but can you tell us a little bit, were you a convert or cradle Catholic? What happened? How was your beginnings?
Eddie, I was born in 1960, and as you know, 62, the Second Vatican Council got into gear, and my mother and father were Catholic. They baptized me Catholic. I was baptized in the font of the Cathedral of St. Mary in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and at that font, now today I frequently make pilgrimages up there because Our Lady in statue form stands right above the font and looks down at all the children being baptized. But at the time, the Baltimore Catechism really went away. The church didn't have a catechism. I was among the millions of children in the 60s and 70s that were just poorly catechized, if at all. I remember my mother indicating to us 7 kids later in our lives that because she really didn't know what to teach us anymore, she didn't teach anything. And so I had a pulse in the pews. When I was in high school, a friend of mine used to go to the back of the church, pick up a bulletin, and then drive down to 7-Eleven to get a Slurpee. And later on in my life, at one of my birthdays, he gave me a little statue. It was a cowboy with a gun. And he'd written on there, I think almost prophetically, death by Slurpee. Because we were cutting ourselves off from the sacraments to go get a Slurpee, and we didn't even know it.
Yeah.
But later in life, I got married by the grace of God. I met a beautiful Catholic woman, and she came from a wonderful family. I love her mother and father very much, still to this day. And it was important for her to get married in the church, and so we did, right in front of Jesus Christ in the tabernacle, although I didn't really recognize he was there. And between 1986 and 1995, God blessed us with 4 sons. And because it was really important to my wife, and it had been part of my muscle memory as a Catholic, we took them in to get them baptized. And then in 1997, I read a book, and it's amazing how God can use material like that. It was a book written by Bud McFarlane called Pierced by a Sword.
I remember it well, yes.
Book. Then it's a fictional book, but it talks about the church in crisis, the church militant, armoring ourselves up with the sacraments in order to stay in the spiritual fight. And it changed my life. I fell deeply in love with the Mass. I fell deeply in love with the sacraments, especially reconciliation. And about that time, I had been promoted to lieutenant. So I had some management responsibilities inside the police department. And my thought processes and my strategic thinking all started to become grounded in the idea that I was a servant of God in that blue suit, and what should I do with the power of the Holy Spirit to be a good servant.
Right. And, it's funny, Luke, because you and I was born in 1961. So we had the same, beginnings as far as being Catholicism. I'm also a cradle Catholic. And I think that that was a phenomenon happening around that time, is that the Second Vatican Council kind of threw people off. They weren't sure how the church was going to proceed, and people were not teaching, giving proper catechesis to their loved ones. So I agree with you that this was going on at that time. But yeah, very interesting. I had 3 sons and then a daughter, so we have some similarities. I want to see a little bit about how things came to be with your family. One of the things I want to say, because you said something about the Baltimore Catechism, and although it never did really go away, it kind of faded off. But I think it's having a resurgence now. We'll get to that in a while, but. But so you described a little bit about how you started your law enforcement career, how you went up in the ranks, let's say, and we could, I want to ask you specifically about, as you ascended in the ranks, how did your responsibility as a Catholic play itself out? In other words, how did that affect your leadership style, your everyday decisions that you were making, like my career progressed, I only went to sergeant. That was enough. But I'll tell you, I would have paid for a good Catholic commander in chief at some point in my career. So why don't you explain how it affected you as far as your leadership style, your everyday decision making process?
I really put on the stars of police chief with fear and trembling, and I can't say, Eddie, that I ever felt comfortable carrying the weight of those stars on my collar, except that every morning before I would go to work, I would stop at the church and kneel down in front of the tabernacle and pray. And then during my tenure as the police chief, our church in Loveland, Colorado was able to successfully run through a capital campaign and construct the first perpetual adoration chapel in northern Colorado at the time. And so my mornings started out on my knees, and I would pray earnestly for the community. I would pray earnestly for the police officers and their families and for safety in the schools. And I hear the music.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Jesus 911. We'll be right back after these short messages.